out of this. You stay out of this, everything's going to be fine. Which is exactly what happens. Sir Robert Carr says he held a parley with the Dutch burghers. He's referring to them as Dutch. In all likelihood, he's also talking to the Swedes. And the burghers and the townsmen, and after almost 3 days of discussion, they consented to his demands. However, the governor and the soldiers, those Dutch soldiers, they would not do so. So what that means is those 90 militiamen who were supposed to be there to supplement your garrison, they're off the table now. So now all we have left are the 30 men in the fort with the governor against 2 ships and 130 English infantry. So, 4th of October, under the rules of warfare and negotiation, Godfrey Meyer, I mentioned we have only a couple sources, he says that the governor and the English commander met each other outside the fort and had a discussion. They came ashore, the fort fired a salute from the 9 guns in the battery. So we know that only 9 of those guns out of those 12 or 14, only 9 of those are mounted guns that you can use. And when you do this, when you fire that salute, it's intended to mean that I don't have any weaponry. I've fired every gun I can fire. We're having a peaceful discussion. I don't have any weapons to fire at you. So they salute each other when they do this. Then the governor and the admiral, the English admiral, which he's probably referring to Sir Robert Carr here and not the admiral of the fleet, the captain of the Guinea, they go off a short distance away and discuss it. And my guess is at that time that's when, you don't have the specifics of this, but Carr probably says to him, look, I got an English assault force, I've got a naval vessel here, we have naval vessels here, you don't have any support coming from the community, we're going to attack. And yet de Hinojosa says, no, we're not doing that, we're going to hold out. And then they split, they part company and go their own separate ways. And then Meyer continues, de Hinojosa comes back in and he tells Meyer to load the cannons with shrapnel and to supply the soldiers with muskets and double arms. I don't know if you know what the term double arms means. It basically means each man is carrying 2 muskets. So that I have 30 men, but I now have 60 rounds that could be fired at one time if I really needed to do it that way. He also asked the soldiers, are you willing to defend the fort? Remember, there were 30 recruits that had just come over like a month earlier. Well, in all likelihood, they're going like, yeah, it's my job. I'm supposed to be here, I'm supposed to defend the fort. And they say, yes, as long as we can stand up, they're going to defend the fort. So we have the beginnings of, or the makings of, what is going to be an assault. That was on the 4th of October. 5th of October, 8 a.m. Sir Robert Carr says, I landed my soldiers on Sunday morning, and then he commands the ships to fall down before the fort within musket shot. In all likelihood, he lands his men, and he says this, and Meyer says this as well, they landed them at 8 o'clock in the morning. But they don't show up at the fort until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Where is everybody for that period of time? That's a long time. So, our supposition based on this, and keep in mind that had you dropped down below the town, he doesn't say they dropped down below the town until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So the ships didn't come down before that, because that would have warned de Hinojosa that they are preparing to assault. Instead, they dropped the English infantry, probably at Crane Hook. And then those 130 man, that 130-man company marches overland around what is Broad Marsh today, although Broad Marsh today isn't as nearly of an obstacle as it would have been in the 17th century. It goes out nearly to William Penn High School. So if you know where that is, the Wilmington Manor area, it goes way out there. Penn Acres, I think, is the name of the community that it's in. At 3 p.m., the English vessels drop down in front of the fort and they fire 2 broadsides in, which is probably the signal for the infantry to attack. And it has taken them that 6 hours or something to march that distance. Carr says, I directed the ships to fire 2 broadsides apiece into the fort. Meyer says at about 3 o'clock, the cannon shots were fired from the ships through the roofs of the houses in the fort. That broadside weight that they could fire from those 2 ships was about 240 to 300 pounds. It's nothing like what the fort could have responded with. With only 9 mounted guns, there's no way they could have responded with that level, that weight of metal that was coming into the fortification. I showed you earlier that we had a bar shot there with a ball with an iron spike that went through it. Bar shot is an incendiary shot. You find the bar is wrapped with cloth or a textile, oil soaked. When you fire that, it lights it, it hits the building and sets the building on fire. That's what it's supposed to do. We recovered that in the ditch of the fort when we did the excavations. So anybody who says that there was just a little bit of firing and then everything's over. If you were in this fort when this was happening and these guys are 100 yards, 200 feet off the shoreline, two broadsides of that much iron, I would not want to have been inside that fortification. On the other side of the fort, to the rear, or the land side, Meyer says at 4 o'clock the English stormed the fort. That infantry company of 130 men attacked the fort, came over the outer wall. The Dutch defenders fired 3 volleys. Remember, we're double armed, we're double shotted, so where each of us is carrying 2 muskets. 3 volleys wouldn't have taken very long to fire, a couple minutes at most. There are no English casualties, which kind of leads you to wonder how accurate the Dutch musketmen really were, but there are 13 Dutch casualties, including 3 who die of their wounds. This is, the number of losses here, this is not, if you kind of proportionally look at this, there's a lot of people who lost their life defending this fort, or were injured defending this fort. Meyer says that in climbing over the wall of the fort, the English in their fury cut down some of the people and wounded many. Now, out of 30 defenders, 13 are injured. That's a high casualty rate. So what happens after the seizure of the fort? Sir Robert Carr, basically allows the settlement to be pillaged and plundered by the English soldiers. And that includes everything from Burlington Island, which is about 40 miles upriver from where we are, all the way down to the mouth of the Delaware Bay. At the Horkill, there is a settlement that is totally wiped out. And it was Plockhoy's settlement, which was essentially a Mennonite settlement. These people were pacifists, and the English come down and just wipe that settlement out as well. 60 to 70 enslaved Africans are captured and taken back into slavery or into English slavery. 100 sheep, horses, cows, oxen, a brew house, a still house, a mill ready to be erected, but it hadn't been built yet. The buoys for out in the water, all the kinds of goods and tradesmen's goods and things, all the corn, all the hay, farming implements and tools, 4,000 pounds sterling, weaponry, all the property that belonged to the city of Amsterdam and officials was confiscated. And that last one is really important. The Dutch soldiers who defended this fort were given to the captain of the William and Nicholas, Captain Morley, and transported to Virginia and sold as servants. Now that story I have yet to get further information on, but that's a statement that is coming from von Swearingen. 20 years after the event, he says, I heard it from the officers, I know that this to be the fact. It would be great to now get into Virginia history and find Dutch soldiers and former Dutch soldiers as they show up as indentured servants, probably not slaves, more like indentured servants in Virginia. What about the English? What happens? The Delaware River and Valley lands are awarded to those soldiers. Probably between the period from about 1664 to 1670, you can find them sprinkled throughout the Duke of York's records. John Carr, in the quote for why he gets land, for good service performed by Captain Carr in storming and reducing the fort at Delaware. William Tom, in consideration of good service on the Delaware. Others, Robert Scott, John Marshall, John Cousins, John Boyer, they had land laid out by the officers of Delaware for 4 soldiers. You have other people, some of these names are names those of you who have grown up in the area may recognize. John Ogle of Ogletown. The Ogle family is a very, very old Delaware name. Wollaston is another very old Delaware name. These are the men who comprise that English assault force. They get land here at the time when that happens. So there's about 25 or so names on this list. In all likelihood, there are more. And when you start to recognize who they are and come across something, for example, where John Bradbourne is shown there in a tract called Drummer's Neck, I would not have thought about this as a soldier until you recognize that there were drummers attached to that company that attacked the fort. Calling a place Drummer's Neck is probably because that guy could very well be the drummer who was associated with the company. Or Paul Marsh, a tract called Soldier's Rest near the Horkill, all the way down to Lewis. So if you want to know more about this project or more about the archaeology and the history of this, there's a number of places you could go. There are a number of websites that you could look at here. The Swedish Historical Museum, the Newcastle Historical Society, the New Holland Foundation, Newcastle Community History and Archaeology has a great page for it, the New Netherland Institute. There are also a number of published volumes you might want to look at. C.A. Westlager did a number of books in the 1960s. The Dutch Explorers is one that's a great one. C.A. Westlager's English on the Delaware is useful. More recent, Jaap Jacob's book on the colony of New Netherland, and Mark Thompson's book, The Conquest of the Delaware Valley. Those are more scholarly volumes, but they also give some really, really good information. And so this is not a kind of moribund study anymore. This is very much of interest to people, the New Netherland, the history of New Netherland. And the thing that you see on the right is the cover of the technical document that we produced for the American Battlefield Protection Program. The Newcastle Historical Society has this digitally, and it should be available to the public. And then, if you really are interested on the archaeology of New Netherland, this is a book that literally just came out less than a month ago. I have a few copies with me here at the cheap cost, not the expensive cost, which I think is outlandish for the University Press of Florida to be charging that much money for a book. But those of you who are online, if you want to, you can use that DC821 code, go to the University of Florida Press webpage, use that code, and you'll get it at that reduced cost. But this is considered to be a really useful volume for the history of New Netherland. And I do have an article in here. Craig Lukasik and I co-authored an article about some of the archaeology at Fort Casimir. And with that, I thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer. I guess, do I stop share? How do I do that? Can I do that? There. Oh, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay? Very good. I will stop now.
Very good.
My grandson was just named Casimir, although not after him.
Okay.
I'll ask you.
And one of the members here dug at that site.
Both 12 and
And both
19.
2012 and
I remember when we
2019.
found the cannonball,
Yeah?
and we're finding the yellow bricks, the Dutch bricks,
Wonderful picture.
and I found the musket ball that made
Thanks,
it.
Leonie.
Very good, there. But they should have delivered nice and crisp.
Now I know
Thank
what
you.
we're doing.
Okay. So I will, we don't have anything else. I will end share here, right? So we can do that.